I'm Norm, plain and simple. I just tell people, just Norm. I do have many titles, I wear many hats, I do many things. So if you really want to know who I am, come visit me. That's the best way to get to know Norm. For me, I have my spirit. You have your spirit. That little chipmunk over there has his spirit. The tree has a spirit. If the fire was going, it has a spirit. You know, I tell people, it's the way I was taught, we all come from the spirit world, born into this physical world. And when the time comes, we go back to that spirit world. So, does that mean we're reincarnated over and over? Possibly. Because we're given a gift and a responsibility while we're here. And if we can fulfill those gifts and those responsibilities when we're here, it takes us in another level of the spirit world, because we're here to learn something here to bring back. And or we're bringing something to the spiritual here to help us here or others. It's not religion. It's spirituality.
My name is John Dennis. I am the Mi'kmaq language keeper for the Mi'kmaq Nation. When I started in this cultural path, I guess you can say, in spiritual path, I was listening to an elder. His name is Bernard Jerome. And Bernard, his name is Banal in Mi'kmaq. So Banal was talking about how culture is hidden in our language. So the word Allah Zudamahan. Allah Zudamahan means to pray. Many people, they would say, oh, this is praying. But Allah Zudamahan, the word Damahan, which means pipe, is hidden in Allah Zudamahan. So the word pipe is hidden in that word for prayer. So as I was going through my spiritual journey, I was smoking my pipe and I did not know. What do I do? When you inhale the tobacco, you don't inhale it. You leave it in your mouth. You pray and you let it out. Much like the prayer tie that goes into the fire and creates that smoke, the smoke comes out of you. So the significance of this prayer that comes from this pipe is personal. Some people would say it's the people's pipe because, you're the person that's the pipe keeper and all this is responsible for the prayers. So some people will say, can you pray for my grandma? She has cancer. Can you pray for this person? This person is sick. So on. And so the person that holds the pipe is the one that will pray. There's the one that will do ceremonies and so on. So it's almost like, I don't want to say a priest, a rabbi or something like that, but it's a person of faith. It's a person that people come to, then they know that their prayers are being met. They are not it's not a holy man. It's not a shaman. Elders say we are just like these instruments around you. That's all that we are. It's just instruments. We are the ones sending. We are nothing more than that. When a person thinks that they are more than this, they have lost who they truly are.
In a way, we are unlicensed counselors. We do cover the mental aspects of life, the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual. We help people who are struggling in relationships. We help people that are dealing with a loss of a job, loss of a loved one. We do that comfort of a lot and support. Just sometimes a person just needs a good ear, someone to listen to them and share that with them. And we're not, how to put it, we can't fix anybody. We can't fix anything. We can help you fix yourself. And a lot of people think that. It's like, it's like if I had a magic wand, I'll go, poof, it's done. But it isn't. Our ceremonies, You know, like the sweat lodge, for an example. Ceremony starts when we light the smudge and we smudge this area. Some people will say, well, it's already been smudged. I says, yeah, but today's a new day, so we're going to smudge again. So we smudge our area, then we offer our tobacco and the medicines to where we're going to have the fire. And each direction represents something. You know, everything we do represents something, and that's the reason why we do it. But the ceremony starts then.
There are many people back home who are just going to church. There are some who just go to sweats, and there are some that do both. There is nothing wrong with that. Some people would say that there's something wrong with that, but it's like, for me, I feel like there's no wrong way to pray. It is only when you're doing it with bad intentions. You know, if you're praying for to win the Powerball or whatever, that is greed.
But a lot of people don't realize when they ask for certain things, some people ask for a spirit name. You know, people want to go ask for a fast or something for whatever reasons. Nowadays you hear people say an Indian name, but it's a spirit name. It's a name that you use when you're praying to our ancestors, when you make that connection. But people, they want to flaunt their name. Oh, I'm this, I'm that, look at me, kind of, and it's not that way. Just like anything else, there's the good and bad, the zing and the zang. So we have to be careful with what we do, how we use our name, because somebody can use our name against us. You don't know. And that's everything we do, we protect ourselves. When we built this sweat lodge, we did ceremony. Ceremony was done before the lodge was put up.
Back then, we would do what is called today a sweat lodge. And so prior to hunting, men would go into a sweat lodge, or after the hunting, they would go into a sweat lodge to cleanse their bodies. So this was a time that people back then, they would cleanse themselves so that they can have that opportunity to be. It wasn't about being pure. It was about being clean and cleansed for your own sake prior to doing any kind of ceremonial activity such as a marriage or something that required, I wouldn't say the purity of a person, but to take out the negativity. So smudging would be taking an abalone shell and then put in the herbs in there. The herbs that were utilized, or the medicines that we call them, would be tobacco, cedar, sweetgrass, or sage. And sometimes some people use different aspects. Instead of tobacco, they use red willow bark back then, and so there's also bear root instead. So there was many different aspects of medicines that were used, and they would light it up, and then a smoke would come, and so they would use this smoke to smudge themselves, and in smudging themselves, again, almost like the sweat lodge, they would take out the impurities, because we accumulate these impurities on a daily aspect. And so when we're driving or we're going through life, somebody will say something, and we are like an energy. This negative energy is attracted to us, and so it stays with us. So the smudging and the sweat lodge and so on really is a time of just prayer. It's a time of getting rid of these impurities that are not your own. Some may be of your own, but sometimes it isn't.
Anybody at any age can become a pipe carrier, or one to pour lodges, lodge keeper. And that has to do a lot with where you go and get your teachings. I've seen, again, getting back to that, what does it mean? What does that pipe represent? Right? There's two parts of that pipe, and each part of that pipe represents something. And what does it mean when you connect them together? What does it mean when you put that tobacco in there? Why do you use the pipe? What does that pipe represent? That's what you're asking me. Go to ceremony, you'll find out. Again, you know, a lot of our teachings, back in the day, we were banned from doing ceremonies. You would be thrown in jail. So a lot of some of our ceremonies and things that are done aren't explained because they just don't want anybody to, oh, I went there, this is what they said, now I can go out and do it. And they mimic what they're doing, but they don't know the full connection as to why. You know, you'll see people carrying the pipe, holding the pipe a certain way, holding it up a certain way, doing their ceremony with it. People see them doing that, but they don't understand why they're doing it. And some people are like, oh, that looks cool, I'm going to do that, yeah, you know. But there's a lot more to it than just that. That ceremony is the connection to the spirit world, our prayers, to the universe because the smoke rises. But there's a lot more to it. Again, I'm not going to explain it all. But it's about experiencing it. And if a person really wants to learn more about the pipe, then they'll start going to ceremonies.
So when it comes to fire, you know, it's one of those things where it is sacred. Fire gives warmth. Too much of it, like water, can hurt you. You know, fire gives light, you know, and all this. But fire sends. You can send smoke and so on. Fire can send prayers from a prayer tie. Place them into the fire. Your prayers become a part of that smoke that go into the spirit world.
We call it a sacred fire now. But did our ancestors call it a sacred fire? That fire was a means of survival. That's where they cooked their food. That's where they kept themselves warm. You know, that fire provided so many things. And they respected that fire and took care of that fire. And that's even today, when we call it a sacred fire, and we say there are certain things that we do, rules, policies, how procedures, whatever you want to call it, but it's how you respect that fire. And that's all we're going explaining, that respect.
The aspect of having a fire is the sacred fire is lit for 4 days. 4 and 7 are one of the numbers that's very equivalent, because there's 7 days in a week, they say, but it's like, you know, in 7 times 4 is 28. Those are the months of the moon. If you follow the moon cycle, those are the months. And so 4 is significant because we have 4 quadrants. We have east, south, west, and north. And every one of them have their own name. When we take a look at some of these names in there, for me, I was enamored that the word for east, it meant root, the root of a tree, a root of a plant. So the root word in there is root, which means east, you know, and all this and so on. And so in Mi'kmaq, words are created, and sometimes there's a root word that's inside. So it's the root, it's the beginning of who we are. It's the beginning of everything. And so from north to east is when people come from the spirit world and where people go into the spirit world. And so there's these 4 quadrants. The last one is north. North is Ogwatan. And I know this because the word Ogwan means you have arrived your destination. So arriving to your destination is the north. So I say the 4 quadrants because when a person passes, we used to have a wake for the person for 4 days. So the person would be with us for 3 days. And during that time, we would have no TV, nothing. And knowing now, talking to my aunt, children are not allowed to the wakes. Nowadays, we're more receptive, and we we have children asking questions. We answer them because during this time, this is a lesson that we can teach about life and death. We can teach so much about who the person was and so on and how they lived. And there's so much that we can learn from that. So in having a sacred fire for that time, people would come to the sacred fire with their prayers. Prayers do not need to be said. In making this prayer tie, a person would say the prayer in their mind and in their mouth, and from there they would place it, wrap it, and then this little tobacco prayer tie would be placed in the fire. Sometimes you don't even need a prayer tie. You can just take some tobacco, place it in your hand and pray, and from there sprinkle the tobacco into the fire so that your prayers go to the spirit world. And so those are the dynamics when it comes to the sacredness or why we have a fire.
You know, when I started seeking these ways and asking for help, the gentleman told me, he says, well, you need to, he says, I'll pray to my grandmothers and grandfathers to help you for now, but you need to find your connections to your grandmothers and grandfathers. He didn't tell me how. He says, I just need to learn. And part of that's through prayer, through ceremony. If they wonder who our grandmothers and grandfathers are, they are our ancestors that passed before us. So let's say if we had a family member just passed away, yesterday. As soon as they pass away, they automatically become an ancestor, regardless of age, because there's somebody in the spirit world we're able to talk to. And if you have that connection, they'll talk back to you and you can hear them. You'll see them. You'll understand them. And believe it or not, a lot of people struggle with that because they haven't received that yet. They receive visions and dreams, which they don't understand either, because they don't understand the message that's being said. But that's where, you go under the guidance of an elder, would help you out, help you understand. But again, the elder is not going to do the work for you. You have to do it all yourself. If you really want to know, you'll have to put the time in. And you will find out.
So I've done prayers for people who have passed on. I've done prayers for an opening of a building. I've done prayers for people who needed healing and so on. Prayers are, to me, good intentions. There are good intentions to see that this person will overcome whatever obstacles that they need to overcome. People will say, can you pray for my aunt and so on? And you say a prayer for them. Not because you were asked, but because it's the goodness in you. We care. We care about other people. We don't want to see their suffering. And so for us, when we have prayers, even like tribal council, they will have prayers that this will be a good meeting. So it's not just praying for people, it's praying that everything will be good. It's praying that this building that is held up will have good intentions for the people. It's praying that this person that's going into the ground or wherever, that their spirit travels in a safe way. And so prayers can be said in so many different dynamics. But again, it's the intention. It's the intent that's with it. Because if you say a recited prayer over and over again, it has no meaning because it's just a prayer that was written. It has no particular meaning unless you put it into that meaning. Such as a poem. Poems and songs and so on, they have no meaning until the context becomes clear. You have a broken heart or something happens and all this, then those lyrics, those words in that poem hit you hard. You understand it. So that is the intent of a prayer is that you come with it with good mentality, a good way of saying so much.
Yeah, I know you like. I understand where you're coming with that question because you actually come out here, and we were here when we had a sacred fire for one of the family, our tribal members, in their family, and I know you were like, I wish I could record this, because there was so much discussion, so much sharing of the fire, the energy, and everything else that's involved. But again, like, I can explain the fire over and over. I can explain the sweat lodge over and over. Talking circles, pipe ceremonies, fasting. But the only way you're going to learn is to experience it. And I guess that's the best way that I can explain it is, again, if you really want to know, you will show up and go. Because you're going to open up a book and read something. But again, if you open up a book and you're reading about sweat lodges, well, who's the author of that book? Where are they from? What nation? What teachings? So then all of a sudden you're like, oh, but if you show up at somebody else's sweat lodge and you're like, you know, I read about blah, 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 and then the elder will be looking at you like, okay, you go sit over there for a while. Because it's the elders doing the ceremony. And basically, you're disrespecting that elder. And a lot of people don't realize that. We're losing touch of why we do ceremonies a certain way. And but those are all good things that we learn, and it's about putting that time in dedication. I've seen people, you know, all of a sudden they want to be the pipe carrier and lodge keeper, and they've been going maybe ceremony 6 months. Within that 6 months, they've earned very little. But the good thing about ceremonies, it makes you feel good inside. It helps you. And with that energy and that spirit that you get, you know, a lot of people like that. But then as elders, when they see people like that, we're always watching and observing them, seeing what they're doing. A lot of people can talk a real good game, but it's not the talk, it's what they do. Their action shows a lot more. You know, it's like saying, you know, like in our communities, in any other community, there's always a death. So nowadays there's Facebook or text message or a phone call. Is there anything you need? Give me a call. Those are easy words to say. And some people do. They back up their words. But some just say that. But when you call them, oh, I can't. I'm busy. I'm not around, or for whatever reason. And sometimes it's true. They're not around, or they're too busy. But our people were compassionate people right from the start. You know, I had a person ask me once, why is it that non-native people can go to our ceremonies? I could have came up with a big old story and explained this, explained that, but all I said was, when these ships first reached our shores, what did our ancestors do? They welcomed them. They fed them. They took care of them in a good way. Because they didn't know what their intent was. They didn't know if they were good or bad or what their motives were. They're a living spirit just like us.